All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Joint Subcommittee with the Assembly on Ways and Means and the Senate Finance Committee. We will start at the beginning, which is our roll. Please, Madam Secretary.
Assemblymember Anderson. Assemblymember Brown May. Assemblymember Dickman. Assemblymember Hibbets. Assemblymember Mosca.
Here.
Senator Wen.
Here.
Senator Titus. Assemblymember Watts. Chair Taylor.
And I am present. Good morning, I'm Angie Taylor, Senator Angie Taylor, and I will chair our joint subcommittee meeting on this morning. Please mark, by the way, please mark those who are late present when they arrive. Okay, thank you so much. Let's go over a little bit of housekeeping. I know you've probably heard this a million times, but you know it's on my notes, so this is what we're gonna do. If you are providing any testimony today, please make sure that you've signed in and please sit right here. Turn the microphone on when you're speaking. Don't forget to turn it off when you aren't, because we all want that. And when you begin to speak, please make sure you state your name clearly and spell your last name. And in fact, whenever you speak, if you would repeat your name for the record, then we can make sure we have accurate minutes from the meeting on today. Today we have a department-wide overview and 6 Department of Corrections budget accounts on the agenda for a hearing. Those are 3710, 3716, 3738, 3739, 3741, and 3754. I would like to welcome the director forward. Please come on. Zorinda? All right, hey. Come on forward and please come to witness table. Now, I will say this, because to the committee, because of how the presentation is, we're going to go through all of the budgets, and then we'll do questions at the end. Okay, so everybody know if you have questions along the way, make sure you just jot them down. So we will go through, Mr. Director, we will go through all of the budgets, and then we'll come back and ask questions, okay? All right, thank you, sir. Begin when you are ready.
Yeah, good morning, members of the chair and members of the Ways and Means Commission hearing. My name is James Urenda, D-Z-U-R-E-N-D-A. I'm the director for the Nevada Department of Corrections, and I'll try to explain some of our budget requests that we're going over today. And first, I just wanted to make sure everybody understands what the Department of Correction is, just in case it's new to that area of yours. But the mission for the Department of Corrections improves public safety by ensuring a safe and humane environment that incorporates proven rehabilitation initiatives that prepare individuals for successful reentry into our communities. Now, in the budget summary, what I'm going to be going over pieces of it. So if you look at this next slide, the budget summary, fiscal year 26, we're having a total appropriations under the governor's recommends budget of $490,250,145. The second part of the biennium of 27, year of 27, $487,123,233, with a total biennium of $977,373,378. I did an updated chart just so everybody can see. On the next slide is just the where our facilities are located. And I thought it's just important because of the way our budget is set up with being all over the state and in areas that drive our budget, such as like transportation and staffing issues, just showing where those facilities are located and why it's obstacles in some of our budget requests. The next thing is I'm going to do just briefly over what the JFA is. We don't do JFA anymore, but the last report we got for our budget was from JFA. JFA was a company that was hired to do our population forecasts, and this is the last projection that they did. We do both male and female forecasts. They're not always accurate. Like I say, they're probably almost always not accurate. But it's all we got, and it's what we use for our projections to determine the following year's budget requests. As you can see, it still shows a continuation of increase in our population, mostly in our male population. And when you look at it, a quick overview from January of 2023, we are currently today at 10,550 as our population numbers. That's combined male and female. When you go back to January of 23, we were below 10,000. So what that means to me is that we, just in that short time period, our population increased by 600. If you continue those projections, if it continues as is, and no changes with either state laws or influx of population into the state, whatever drives the population forecast, you could possibly look at another 600 in the next 2 years. The JFA predicts that by the year 2030, we have to start looking at building another state prison to be able to handle the population increases all the way up to that point if we do nothing different. What I mean about doing nothing different, our goal in the Department of Corrections is to do more for the offender population, for programs, for services, connections to the communities, involving more of the community and volunteers and community services into our facility so that we can actually provide better tools for offenders to be more successful. When we do that, we can expect that they succeed more in the community so that we have less of those offenders reoffending to come back in. So our goal on our budget also is to find ways that we can actually reduce our population by doing a better job at what we do in the prison system. Position summary. I think it's important also to note the difference from last session to now. We were at a crisis situation last session when we talk about vacancies in the correctional facilities. We ended up analyzing what our bottlenecking was or what our problem was with hiring of employees, and found that a lot of it was our own fault. We slowed or had too slow of a process of onboarding, too slow of a process of hiring. When you have someone put in for the position for correction officer, they most likely, more than not, put in for positions all over the state, whether it's DPS, whether it's the county facilities, county police, and they will take the first offer they get, not knowing they'll get another offer. Slowing the system down means that we will lose more of the employees to potential employees to other agencies. What we did was we hired a company called All-Star Talent. All-Star Talent took over all of our recruiting, hiring, research, and our process for hiring, which was speeding it up. Literally, when someone took an application in, within 48 hours, someone was contacting the employee physically and going over the whole process, easing the process and getting them through it so they actually are successful and have a comfort level of trying to understand how the process works. With that, we went from positions like at Lovelock. Last session, I mentioned 49% vacancy for correction officers at Lovelock, 51% vacancy at Ely. Our state has entirely shifted to the point where we currently have 86 in our academy today. Our vacancy rates were dropped to a point where we actually stopped hiring at one point in southern part of Nevada because we had over 5,000 applications and our vacancies in the southern part went to 0. That's how big of a shift change it is. Just so everyone will understand, when you talk about overtime and where those numbers come from, we were at a point after COVID where we reduced our minimum staffing levels. The minimum staffing levels went to a point where it was dangerous, where it should never have happened. When you start getting all these staff on board, we start increasing those minimum staffing levels to put staff back in places where they should have been. Towers that were being unmanned, which ended up being a subject of an escape in 2022. These are places that are safety concerns that when you bring them up. So when you bring up these minimum staffing levels, you start seeing an increase in overtime when those positions are being filled. But they're positions that are necessary. I'm just going to leave it at that because it does come up later on and what that means. Going over the next slide, 3710, which is the Director's Office budget. Department of Corrections provides professional staff to protect the community and provides opportunities for offenders for successful reentry to the community through education, training, treatment, work, spiritual development, being sensitive to the rights and needs of the victims. The major tasks for the budget director's office include long-range planning, classification of offenders, inmate records, transportation of inmates, investigations, information services, food services, plant operations, safety and health assurance, accounting, fiscal and personnel services, training, contract services, and procurement. So the first one I'll go over is the budget account 3710, the director's office budget. The first one that I'll go over is 550. It's for we're requesting in our budget for an automated case management system. It's called Recidiviz, is the system. And what it does is it adds efficiency to our case development planning for the offender and our time search calculations. And what that means is last session there was a Senate Bill 413 that changed our direction on making it more transparent to not only the courts and the offender, but the families and the community on calculating sentences. We went from a hand calculating sentence to go to a percentage-based calculation. And this system will help us also be able to enhance it. And it'll also help us to enhance what programming needs are necessary so that when we do AI for the offender's past, that AI will pick up what's necessary for programming, for making sure the person's successful in their needs, so that we know right off the bat when they first come in what those needs are, so it's not found out when they're about to be released. It also allows us to transfer those needs that come up in the assessments to community providers, parole and probation, halfway houses, so they understand what needs are for that offender to make sure they're successful. The next one I got is 902. This is transfers from a Humboldt conservation camp, which we are currently closed, moving those positions to the director's office. I just want to note that this one, and I'll go over the next ones, that these are currently still being discussed at the GFO office, because you'll see some budget amendments on this one, and subsequent ones that I will mention that we're looking at budget amendments for. But that's really what it is just the closure of the camp Humboldt and moving that positions to the director's office. Why it's important with some of these positions that we're moving, when you talk about transportation costs and training, we don't have enough staff that are assigned to transportation and training. So what we do is we pull correction officers off the line at the facilities to fill those positions, and it takes the position that we pull them off of, and it requires overtime to fill it. It's important that we move the positions to the appropriate places so that we can reduce the overtime, but also fill them so we don't have to pull senior staff out of facilities to cover transportation and training. The next one is 903. It's the same thing. It's moving certain other positions over from Wells Conservation Camp. In our budget, we have closure of Wells. I guess I could go over it now. Wells, we were looking at originally last session closing Carlin camp because of the fire conservation piece that was being moved out of there by NDF. We ended up looking at engineering-wise Wells and Carlin, which are pretty identical in size and capacity. When the engineerings looked at Wells, they said that there were too many repairs that needed to be done, that it would cost too much money, that Carlin, which has the same capacity, had very few repairs that needed, or the cost of the repairs compared to Wells. So we changed it to close Wells and keep Carlin open, just changing the population. Population of Carlin, that where the wildland firefighters are moved to the other camps where they still are doing the wildland firefighting training, and moving Wells, which is our minimum security protective custody offenders, and some community trustees over to Carlin. I think it's important to note also those community trustees piece is going to be important because we're still going to have NDF train those individuals on suppression, fire suppression, so that we could offer Carlin and the local community over there support by those offenders going out to clear land around, especially around the train tracks, so it could prevent fires in the future, which would be a good assistance. Also, Carlin needs the assistance in the winter time with shoveling some of the elderly community places, which we do, the public access, as well as clearing of cemeteries and public areas. I think it's important for the state to continue to provide those services to that area. If we close that facility, those services would no longer be available for their help, for our help for them. Next one, 904. Same thing. Tonopah is a closed camp. It's currently being mothballed. That's also the same thing with moving those positions over to the director's budget. Again, this is still under discussion with the GFO for possible amendment. 905 is the same thing. It's just different positions from there over to the director's budget. Again, this is still being discussed with the GFO office for a possible amendment. 906 is the request for 20 positions to move out of the offender store fund. This is when we have offender store fund, what it is when we sell commissary items, which if you don't know what commissary is, it could be it's hygiene items, it could be food items, it could be body items like lotions or powders that are approved, things like that we sell to the offender population. There's a markup on items except for hygiene items, but there's a markup items so that we can use that markup to pay for 20 positions. Those 20 positions are store clerks, a whole bunch of different positions. We're asking for that to be moved out of that fund, offender store fund, so that we can actually use that revenue that comes in to decrease prices even more for the offenders, so their families aren't suffering as much with providing the money to their loved ones, but also putting it where it really needs to go, not using the backs of the offenders to pay for our staff as where it shouldn't be. So we're asking for that 20 positions from the offender store fund to be moved out of that account. 907, again, this is just supervisor positions coming from Wells to the director's office budget. What I think is important too is when we do training, having supervisors that are more senior to actually do the training. Right now, like I said, we're pulling correction officers to do it. We need more the supervisors to be able to provide that training because of their expertise and their experience, to be able to show them that they were that well to be able to be promoted. We need those type of supervisors to be able to do the training for the new staff that come in, and also do the appropriate in-service training for those that are already currently doing, instead of, like I said, pulling officers off the housing unit line. 908, this is a change in our agency with moving our EEO, which is our Equal Employment Opportunity Investigator position, moving that over to DHRM. So it's just moving that position from our account and moving it over to Department of Administration DHRMs, so that they are now our EEO investigating position there, so they can do our department and others. 933, this again is moving specific positions from Warm Springs to the director's budget. This was a facility that was closed over, I think it was 4 years ago. This facility was closed and the positions there were moved out, filled into vacant positions. The ones that were not vacant were still carried over to cover the duties of facilities that were in need. This is to actually request and have those remaining positions moved over to the director's budget and taken off of the Warm Springs account. Under one-shot appropriations, we're looking at technological upgrades and replacements. A lot of this is the fiber lines or the connections to fiber lines and making our communication centers where they should be, and our IT, also not our contracts, but our licensures that we have with the different IT divisions, keeping those being paid and making sure that our upgrades to our system match with our new technology that we're getting.
Mr. Director, please, excuse
Sure.
me, please excuse the interruption. We're going to have separate hearings on the one-shots.
Oh, okay.
Right, because they have bills, so if we can just skip right past that and.
Sounds better to me.
Forging
Thank you.
ahead. All right, thank you. I didn't think you would mind.
All right, going into budget account 3716, Warm Springs Correctional Center. First, I want to make sure it's clear, we are not opening this biennium, Warm Springs. However, eventually Warm Springs will have to be opened. If you looked at our GFA report that I showed in the beginning with our increase in population, we are going to run out of space. And what's happening when you look at space and why are we closing minimum camps and we're running out of space, we're running out of space in the medium security levels, not our minimums. When you look back on changes of laws that have happened over the years, specifically AB 236 in the 19th session, it changed a lot of the sentencing structure and felonies, the class of felonies to lower classes and different sentencing structures that affected our population for a good reason for us. However, when you start getting offenders in now, that increase in population, we're not getting the current low-level offenders anymore. We are getting higher level. Our lower-level offenders are being moved from the courts and having transition into the community from the services that they provide, not that we do, so our numbers are decreasing. Of our minimum security. However, when we are intake more offenders in a year than we are releasing, that means our population's going up, and it means that our medium security beds are being filled. Currently, we have about 480 medium security beds left. And when I was explaining the population numbers, if we keep going up and go up to 600 in another 2 years, those beds are going to be filled if we don't get creative what we're doing with our current bed space. So eventually Warm Springs will have to open. What I'm asking in Warm Springs for our budget is also a lot of the repairs and upgrades that need to be done. And they need to be done for the purpose because we got to be ready for this. We can't delay if we start having offenders on the floor for overflow housing. We need places for them. If I have to open up a facility, I need it ready to go. Which it will happen, just don't know when. So a lot of these repairs get more and more expensive as the years go on, especially when you're talking about kitchens and HVAC systems and issues that actually raise and get costly more over the years. So I just wanted to let you know that Warm Springs will be enhancements to Warm Springs. For maintenance things that will come up in this year's budget that I need to make sure it happens so we're ready to go. But when we're talking about the enhancements of transfers out of Warm Springs, like I said, closed. There's still positions that are that have not that are not working currently at Warm Springs, but are filling positions elsewhere. And again, this entire enhancements that I'm going to go over on this slide are still being under discussions with the GFO office, so you'll probably see some amendments to the budget coming out on regards to all of these. But I'll go over them individually. 930 is a correctional sergeant from the Warm Springs over to the Southern Desert budget. There's also the 931, which is a correctional sergeant and a lieutenant, to over to Northern Nevada CC budget. The request for a sergeant position that's currently at the Warm Springs to be moved over to Three Lakes Valley Conservation Camp. The correctional sergeant and administrative assistant and senior officer position from Warm Springs over to the director's budget, and a correctional caseworker specialist from Warm Springs over to the Ely State Prison budget account. And two more. Have a 935 correctional sergeant from Warm Springs over to the Florence McClure budget, and a correctional sergeant position and lieutenant from Warm Springs over to the High Desert State Prison budget. Now, Southern Desert Correctional Facility, for those that don't know, it's a fully male, medium security facility that's about 40 miles north of Las Vegas. The institution has 10 different housing units with a capacity of 2,217. It houses mostly general population, medium custody male adult offenders. It provides education and vocational training through the Clark County School District. Includes Braille, culinary arts, janitorial service, and computer programming. It also is known for its strong emphasis on programs and rehabilitative services to include substance abuse, reentry, and psychoeducation classes, which are the largest programs in the state. Prison industries, that includes auto maintenance, auto restoration, and other various industries, and inmate vocational card sorting program. All of these are designed to provide education and programming opportunities to help them when they're being released to be able to have these skills. In the Southern Desert 3738 account, it adds a correctional caseworker specialist. And the reason for this is it's a program officer position to do an oversight of the grievance process for the offenders, which the state has never had. We've noticed an increase in our civil cases against the department, and most of those are for insufficient follow-up on grievance procedures and follow-up to ensure that if something needed to be changed or inmate to be made whole, that's what the grievance coordinator actually does. And when it's not being done, the offenders take it to court. So that's going to help us in the process to make sure that we are doing what we should be doing for the offender population and reducing the amount of cases going to civil litigation. Account 2278, this number is currently changed, but we asked for 49 positions to be added to an emergency response team at Southern Desert. The 49 position numbers became because it was calculated on a 24/7 operation. However, correctional emergency response teams are not necessary, I believe, on the midnight to 8 in the morning, because the offenders are locked in their cells. So I took all those midnight positions away, which moves it from 49 positions down to 34. What is a correctional emergency response team, and why is it necessary at Southern Desert? In the past, the emergency response team was only assigned and approved for the High Desert State Prison. And the thought process is since the Southern Desert Correctional Center is across the street, that those staff on that emergency response team can go across the street and respond to emergencies. However, when you start, every other facility in the state, Northern Nevada, CC, Ely, they have their own emergency response teams for those emergencies. Southern Desert doesn't because they are utilizing the High Desert. However, with the population change, where we moved the higher security and more dangerous population from Ely State Prison to High Desert, it is almost impossible to move out some of those, or move out the emergency response team from High Desert to go across the street when the emergencies are happening at High Desert. When there's emergencies at Southern Desert, we need the emergency response teams to assist with them, because we can't just keep, when we're initiating emergency response, you can't just keep pulling staff off the yards and off of housing units to help with an emergency response in the long term. That's what these emergency response teams are for. And when you can't pull them out of high desert because of that population, we only have the ability to move staff off, lock units down, keep them locked down for long term, so that we could use the emergency staff from those areas to act as the emergency response teams, which is inappropriate. So that's going to look at 34 positions for that to incorporate it into Southern Desert. 901. This is a request for senior correction officer, lieutenant, and 3 officers from 3 lakes. What happened over the years, these positions were assigned to what's called boot camps. Boot camps were not in operation now, I believe, since 2016. But those positions were still being utilized over at Southern Desert for the programming piece. These positions for programming and supervision because of the increase in vocational services and moving boot camps to more program services. So it's establishing and moving those positions over from 3 Lakes to Southern Desert for that purpose. The 930, this is a sergeant position from Warm Springs again to the Southern Desert, which again I said is still in discussions with the GFO office for discussions and possible budget amendment on this. Wells Conservation Camp. I briefly mentioned it. The Wells Conservation Camp, we are looking at shutting it down as soon as all the offenders are moved out of Carlin that are currently in the wildlife training program with NDF, Wildlife Firefighter Training Program. When they're moved out, we're going to be moving the offenders from Wells to Carlin, which will give us the ability to shut wells down. Under wells, these enhancements, all these enhancements that I'm going to be going over on this page are still, again, like I said, are in discussions with the governor's finance office, and we'll possibly see budget amendments on all these, but I'll go over them individually. 900 is a senior correction officer from Wells to Northern Nevada CC. 902 is a caseworker specialist from Wells to the Lovelock Correctional Center. 903 is 9 correction officer positions from Wells to the director's office budget. 904 is the transfer of inmate population from Wells budget to High Desert to that budget, which will include the inmate drivens move from Wells to High Desert. 907, the transfers of the lieutenant and sergeant position from Wells to the director's budget. A request for the two vehicles from Wells to be moved to the Ely State Prison budget for transportation needs within the Department for Central Transportation. Humboldt Conservation Camp. Humboldt Conservation Camp is currently closed. It was a training center for the NDF, the Division of Forestry, for wildland firefighting training. It is no longer being utilized and is currently closed. So these enhancements, these 3 enhancements, again, this is still being discussed with the GFO office, and we'll most likely see budget amendments to these 3. But we have 900, budget account 900, transfers a lieutenant, 1 sergeant, and 1 caseworker from Humboldt to Lovelock Correctional Center. 901 is a transfer of a senior correction officer from Humboldt to the Northern Nevada Correctional Center. 902 is the 7 correction officer positions from Humboldt to the director's office budget. Tonopah. Tonopah is another conservation camp that was at one time utilized for training of wildland firefighters with the Department of Forestry. It is currently closed. And the next enhancements are, again, moving these positions These positions that I'm going to be mentioning on this next slide, there's 6 accounts. These accounts, again, are still being reviewed by the Governor's Finance Office, and you'll most likely see some budget amendments on this. But 902 is a caseworker position from Tonopah to the Northern Nevada Correctional Center budget. 1 sergeant position from Tonopah to the Director's Office budget. 1 sergeant position from Tonopah to the Director's Office budget. 1 lieutenant from Tonopah to the High Desert State Prison budget. And the 2 vehicles from Tonopah to the High Desert State Prison budget. That's all I have on what was being asked to be presented today, and hopefully I got across what I needed to, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Director. We do have several questions, and we will just get started on them. We'll start with Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and all the details with it. I think my first question has to do with the GFO more than anything else right now, the Governor's Finance Office. Is there an intent to possibly amend the contract with Justice Planners, LLC, to align the projections with the state's budget cycle so the forecasts are a little bit more updated?
Sure. James Owner, for the record, I have them here if you want to ask them anything specific, but yes, it might be a good idea to have them come to the table just to go over some specifics on the forecast, if it's possible.
Assemblymember?
Chair, may they?
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Please,
If they could
please come
come, so
forward.
that way I can, oh, my good friend.
Thank you so much. And before you begin to answer, if you will just state your name, spell your last name for the record. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Curtis Palmer, P-A-L-M-E-R is my last name, and I serve as the Deputy Director for the Governor's Finance Office.
I can restate it if you'd like me to, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming up. So it just feels like the contract with Justice Planners LLC has there an intent to possibly amend, so updated forecast would be a little bit more, we would be provided them a little bit more between the development of the timeframes.
So for Justice Planners, I do
I'm
not...
sorry, is your microphone on?
It is.
Okay.
I'll get closer.
Thank you so much.
Curtis Palmer, for the record. Thank you. I am not aware of any plans to amend or adjust the contract that you just mentioned. However, we have been in contact with JFA to help provide updated numbers. I got an email late last night that I read this morning, and she is willing to, the owner of the company is willing to jump through some hoops and help us provide those updated reports. So that is in the works, yes.
Follow up, if I may? Thank you for that. So, and time frames are always fun because I think that during the Division on Parole and Probation's budget hearing on the 14th, the governor's, I believe you mentioned that there was a short-term contract with James F. Austin and Associates being developed because of that caseload projections. Is the intent of the GFO to also have James F. Austin provide updated, I guess, offender projections, as well as so that way we can have a little bit more of an idea?
Yes, Curtis Palmer, for the record. So they will, the James Austin, the JFA report that we referred to in the past will be updated for both parole and probation and corrections. By the 14th is what the date I've been given so far. So.
Final update, if I may. How did these two organizations work together? Or is it just the information that you give them? Are they working together? Are they completely separate? I think that's where my confusion is coming from, is I'm like, we've got two different groups that possibly could be looking at the exact same information.
Right, Curtis Palmer, for the record. So they don't work together. We were actually transitioning from one to the other. There was some mishaps in the negotiation of the contracts and moving from one to the other, which has kind of left us in the lurch here. So
I'm still confused. I understand the answer, but I think that my confusion is something that I can do offline possibly with that further discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember. Chair Watts?
Thank you, Chair. I think mishap is a good way to characterize this, and hopefully it does provide some more clarity to my colleagues on the committee, right? For a long time, we're working with JFA to get projections for both the Department of Corrections and for parole and probation. Decided to go in a different direction, but due to some mishaps, we don't have updated projections that we rely on and that are statutorily required for PMP in order to set caseloads and build the budget. So the question that I actually have is, do we have any estimate of what the cost is to have JFA step back in and help fix this mishap while we're also bringing on justice planners, I guess, on a going forward basis?
So the dollar amount for parole and probation, the short contract that we were doing there was $16,000. In the communication that I received this morning, it will be an additional $34,000.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. From 16,000 to 34. Okay.
That's, yeah, $50,000.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Assemblymember Mosca, you have questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. Great to see you. My question is really on staffing in general, and first commend you on everything you've done with the vacancy rates to make those lower. Wasn't on this committee last session, but was on judiciary, so I know that was what you talked about a lot, so thank you for that. And so my question is specifically on the staffing study that's being done by Corrections Consulting Services. Do you feel like the agency will be able to fully expend the $395,000 appropriation from Assembly Bill 507 before June 30th this year?
James Render for the record. Yes, I have had direct communications with the CEO for Corrections Consultant. I told them that this study needs to be done by that point, and I need to have results and have a report submitted by June 30th, and it needs to be completed. What they ended up doing was increase their amount of research availability by increasing their staff just for this study. So they're going to be out. Right now, we submitted all of our post charts and administrative regulations related to them. So they're doing their study right now off-site. They're going to hit every single facility with a evaluation team, and they claim by June 30th they will have this completed and submitted to us for final.
Follow-up, Chair. Thank you. Thank you. That's great to hear. We appreciate that. And I know something else that you've talked a lot about is moving the maximum security offenders from Ely State Prison to High Desert State Prison. Can you talk about how that has improved the department's ability to manage offenders, and if there's been any unanticipated consequences? Thank you.
Sure, James Renda for the record. I got both. Where it helps is the major reason for the catalyst for the move from Ely to High Desert was the emergency response. And this has been going on years. It was a concern of mine, even the first session I was here in 2019 of, if we had a statewide or facility-wide emergency at Ely, would we have enough staff for response? We found out when we had 3 homicides over the summer at Ely that we do not have enough response. We even asked for assistance from the local sheriff's office, which we got 2 employees. We had the incident went past staff that were even working 16 hours, sending 8 offenders in a helicopter to hospitals in Las Vegas. We were putting staff up there that were past their 16 hours of work, which we should never do. It really got me so alarmed that I truly believed it was necessary to move that population out so that we did have a less of a violent population, an easier to manage population, and a population that doesn't tend to have the incidents that high security and violent population have. So moving the high security condemned unit and high risk profiles out of Ely, what it did, I moved in low level mediums that were protective housing offenders. If you look at the history of those type of offenders, they very rarely get into trouble. They are very willing to participate in programs. They're very willing to work with staff. The incident rates were dramatically reduced We very rarely ever have a serious incident of a stabbing or a homicide with that population, because that type of population is afraid to move. They do, when you move them to Ely, they're not going to want to move out of there. They're very cooperative population because they're afraid that if they move out of there, their lives could be in danger. So moving that population there reduce the incidents. And when you talk about the type of incidents that happen with a high-risk population, Ely required a tremendous amount of helicopter trips that were for med trips in the past. We have not seen one helicopter trip since the move. With our helicopter trips that we move for medical out of there is because the local hospital there don't deal with some of the type of head traumas, stabbings, or life-saving things that we need for surgical. So we move them to Las Vegas. So we fly them to Ely to Las Vegas for that purpose. In order to get a helicopter to Ely, we contract out of Salt Lake City. Extremely, extremely expensive. Like I said, we have not had one since we made the move, and I don't anticipate any unless there's a medical history of somebody that we need it for.
Mr. Director, a couple of things. One, if you can get to were there any unintended consequences? And then secondly, if you can stay concise with just the question. You are very passionate about what you do, and we appreciate that, but we got to get out of here at some point.
Sure.
Okay.
So
Thank
the
you.
consequences, what happens when you move that lower level population to Ely? You need programming. It's very difficult to get programming up at Ely. We are kind of waiting for this tablet program to get into effect and move them, and that's my first priority. We're going to get tablets for every single offender in the department, and we will be doing a lot of long-distance education, college courses through Pell Grants, programming pieces that we could connect with the community programs. It's going to be a different world when we get the tablets up there, and I think that's going to be our answer right now, because we have very difficult possibility of getting program staff to Ely. So the program piece was a concern of mine, and it's still a concern, but I think we have an answer to it.
Thank you, Director Zerunda.
Chair, might I step back and add some clarity to one of the questions about that staffing
Sure,
contract?
go right ahead. Just state your name
Yep.
for the record.
Kitty DeSocio, DESOCIO. I'm the Deputy Director of Support Services for the Department of Corrections. I just want to step back to the question about the staffing contract. We received the one shot of $365,000 for 2024-25. The contract came in under. It came in at 165,000. So we will be reverting $200,000 back to the general fund on that, just to add a little clarity.
Thank you so much.
But it will be spent. The whole contract will be spent.
Well, we always have time for interruptions when you're giving money back. We will make time for that. Oh, thank you so much. We have another question from Chair Watts.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we always like coming in under budget. And I'm glad to hear that we're going to make sure that we get it done. I know it wasn't your administration, but I think there have been plans to do a staffing study since 2021. So looking forward to actually having something to look at and see what adjustments need to be made from that. I have a question. I think there's probably going to be some more questions about the conservation camps. I just want to ask at a very high level. So, as you know, Director, we had a lot of conversation about this last session, figuring out for all the different facilities and particularly the conservation camps what the plan was going to look like moving forward. I think you did a good job talking about the change that we're seeing between Wells and Carlin from that plan last time. So I just want to know, high level, are there any other changes? So you mentioned those facilities that we closed down. I know that we had another facility that we not only closed down, but we're completely kind of reclaiming and giving that land back. So any other updates that you have in terms of not just this biennium, but long-term, the plan for those camps, and any changes from kind of what we had talked about previously?
Sure. James Renner for the record. The only camp I see is in long-distance planning that will be affected is Jean. Jean Conservation Camp right now has, it's only at 25% capacity. It's a women's facility that is used for NDF for training of wildland firefighters. Those numbers are depleting to the point where I do believe that Gene will eventually be closing, probably brought up in the next biennium. Those offenders right now, I believe we only have 82 out of a 200 and something bed unit. So eventually that facility will be shut down. The other ones, I do not see anything happening to. NDF consolidated their services. Pioche, Stewart, Three Lakes, those are still very strong in wildland firefighting training, and I don't see that going down. Those beds will most likely be filled with the other camps that are closing, so I think those are going to be staying strong, and I don't see any changes to them, just the Gene possibly.
You're a good follow-up? Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from Assemblymember Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Zarenda. It's great to see you here. I have a question about staffing, right? As I look at the governor's recommended budget, it looks like there's a recommended transfer of 151 positions between the NDOC budget account, majority, which should have no impact, right? But then it looks like some of those positions were eliminated in the last session of the legislature, but they somehow appeared again. So I'm curious to know, could you confirm if the recommended transfer of positions to the correctional facilities are in alignment with the legislatively approved staffing levels that you have?
Kitty DeSocio for the record. We are currently working with the governor's finance office to straighten that out. So we will be doing amendments and such to make sure that we're going to have to move people from those positions into other vacant positions, so we're not to hurt anybody that's currently employed. But we are addressing that as we speak.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair? Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate the clarity of just trying to find the people. Where are they going? And then my follow-up with that is, have you developed updated post charts, right? I know that we talked about that. Really just demonstrating the need for the transfers, right, to reflect in the institution-specific staffing levels.
Katie DeSocio for the record. Yes, we will be doing that. It's going to have to be in conjunction with some of these amendment changes that we're doing to the budget. But we are reviewing our post charts currently.
Thank you. Can you clarify who does the post chart? Like, where does the staffing level review come from? Is it an outside entity? Are we doing that internally? What's the methodology?
So James Aranda, for the record, there's going to be two changes to the post charts. First is the ones that we see as at the facility level with where the wardens are showing that we have shortness of staff or staff that were never added to positions from the last post charts. Simple one is like building 12 up at Ely. The post charts doesn't have anybody assigned to work midnight shift out in the building. Well, obviously, we need to have some officers working out there, so those will be changed at the facility level. What we're also looking at is the Corrections Consultants, Inc., and that's going to help us adjust these post charts again. That'll be the second adjustments. But the adjustments in the current ones are done by the wardens, recommendation from the wardens to the Deputy Director of Operations for justifications on why you need staffing in areas that were not posted or put on the original post charts. A lot of them that you'll see in the next post charts are going to be for like hospital guarding, hospital transportation, hospital trips. Right now, the statewide in the post charts, we're only authorized 20 positions statewide, split up all over the place for that purpose. But we average 67 officers every single day out doing these things. They're not posted. They're not on the post charts. Those post charts will be adjusted to put those positions in there. But those are the things. The warden starts at the first level. The corrections consultant will be the second level.
Thank you so much. I do have a couple of questions that, since we're talking about those kinds of decisions, I want to talk a little bit about the staff. Okay, so this is going to be a two-part question. Can you let us know how many staff do you currently have in the Central Transportation Unit and in the Training Division? The second part of that is, how is it determined that you need 19 more in the Central Transportation Unit and 6 more in the Training Division?
James Aranda, for the record, I don't have the currents in front of me, which we can submit that. what I brought up is that in the transportation, we don't have enough staff for the increase of transportation trips that we do. We pull staff from the facilities on overtime to cover them, and that's why it was for the increase in the transportation piece, was because we don't have enough staff to do transportation.
Was it determined that you needed 6?
Based upon the average that was going out and how many average correction officers pulled from the facilities to do transportation.
And then
it's
the
the
same-
same thing with training. So
Okay,
when
thank
when you have increase in correction officers pre-service training and in-service training, which were mandated, we don't have the staff to be able to do the training, so we certify officers throughout the agency and we pull them off the line. That's where we got the 12 number from.
Okay, I'm sorry, that was 6 for training and 19 for central
19,
transportation.
correct.
Okay, so based upon your need and what you've seen happen.
Based upon the average that they've been pulling out of the
Right.
facilities, correct.
Okay, appreciate that, Mr. Director. Okay, Senator Titus, you have a question or two?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. And I know we're asking a lot of staffing questions. And to your credit, you've looked at the staffing issue from the time I've been here for 6 sessions. And I've always been on a transportation or safety committee. Staffing is huge. And I was just curious about your current, I'm sorry if you already said it, but what's your current vacancy rate?
I don't have the total today that's in front of me, but I believe it's at 12.
At 12?
12%.
Which is actually quite an improvement.
I was at 34% when we first started in last session.
Right, that's what I thought. So congratulations there. And so I think you're really trying to think about how we can make this work. So thank you for that. Can you tell me why the need and the benefit of recommendation to transfer positions from closed facilities to open facilities rather than just eliminating the positions within the budget account of the closed facilities? Just give me the math there.
So James Renner, for the record, I brought that up too. Is do we eliminate the positions and create new positions, or do we just transfer positions to fill them into the places where we're asking for the new positions? When you have staff that are consistently covering positions for, like I was mentioning, the 12 to 8 shift, we're constantly using overtime for that. If I move the position over where something I'm going to be using every single day, I move the position over, use that position to cut the overtime out. And that's what we were looking at. That's why it's still under discussion with the GFO offices, is all these positions that are moving are going to be filled in to cut the overtime down where we use positions that are not currently on a post chart. And that will help with reducing the overtime costs.
Great, thank you. And Madam Chair, may I ask another question? And so I'd like to go back to your population numbers and the projected population numbers. And I'm going to throw this question out there. Currently, we know there's a big conversation regarding illegals in housing in our jail system. I know a lot of those are housed in some of the county facilities. Do you have any idea how many illegals we house currently in our Nevada prison system?
James Renner, for the record, yes, I do. So undocumented, I'll call them, because I can't confirm with the ICE whether they're illegal or not. But undocumented, we have 1,108 as of today.
So if we remove those from our facilities, that will open up some beds.
That is correct.
It's my understanding that federal government pays for every one of those undocumented that we have there, so they're truly not a cost to us.
James Renner, for the record. Well, under SCAP funds, what we do is they don't pay for them, but they pay for us reporting of them. So when we have offenders that come into the agency as new, we report every single offender that, they're not undocumented, but every offender that has a birth outside of the United States. We submit to the Department of Justice. That comes under SCAP funds. They pay us for all this. So we get SCAP funds every year, average about $2.7 million a year coming from the SCAP funds that do for that. But they don't pay us for the ones that are actually here, like per diem, like some of the private facilities getting paid to house them because they're here on a state sentence.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. I wanted to get back to this, the numbers that I asked, the current numbers. If you can get those to the committee secretary and we can get those out, fantastic. Chair Watch, want another run?
Yes, thank you. So I have some questions about some additional, I guess, conservation camp questions. Can you clarify the duties of the officers who are recommended to transfer from Three Lakes Valley Conservation Camp to Casa Grande? And I think one of the main things that we're trying to get some clarity on is, does that align with the role for a correctional officer?
So James Render for the record, again, those are the same group of staff that were assigned to boot camps in the mid-2000s, which we don't do anymore. Those staff were actually, they changed boot camps to go into reentry services and vocational and programs. Those are just the staff that are currently doing it that were originally assigned to the boot camp. So it's just really putting them where they were doing to justify that their job is what it's there for. So they're doing it already. It's just formally moving those positions.
Thank you. Follow up? So on that same note, we have the movement of officers from Three Lakes to Southern Desert. So I guess just getting confirmation, is that a similar situation? So responsibilities are essentially the same. You've got those people, and so you're just moving the people to where the need has been identified?
James Renner for the record, both groups are the exact same group of people that came from the boot camps. They just split them up because that's where the services went. The vocational services and all those programs went to both Southern Desert and Casa Grande, so it was a split where those staff actually went.
Thank you so much. Assemblymember Dickman?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Zerinda. It's good to see you. Talking about, as long as we're talking about transfers, the inmate welfare account and offenders store fund budget transfers, can you just clarify for the record that these positions recommended for transfer would continue to primarily focus their efforts on duties related directly to the operations of the offender commissaries and offenders store fund?
James Renner for the record, yes. So currently, there's 49 positions that are split up between the Offender Store Fund and Inmate Welfare Fund. The ones that went into the Inmate Welfare Fund are directly related to programs. So we're paying from the Inmate Welfare Fund to pay for the full-time employee positions for programs. The other positions that were under Offender Store Fund are 20 positions that are directly related to the operation, full-time employee operations of the stores and accounting for the stores. So we use the money that comes out of the revenues that come out of the offender store to pay for those full-time positions. So it was split up what those were, and we were asking for the 20 positions to be moved out of there to the director's account, and the rest of them that were in the inmate welfare to be moved to programs.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, but just wanted to make sure their duties would remain the same. Okay,
Correct,
thank
they
you.
will.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember. I'm going to switch up a little bit. Director Zerinda, talk a little bit about the grievances. You talked about that and being able to address those so they don't turn into lawsuits, right? And you're asking for 6 new positions, 2 in Northern Nevada, 2 at Southern, and then 2 in Ely. How do you expect having those 6, how will they help with the efficiencies when it comes down to grievances?
James Arenda for the record. So currently, we have over 800 pending civil litigation cases against the Department of Corrections. Those pending litigation cases have to be exhausted by what we call a Step 3 grievance process. So a grievance gets through the whole system to be able to resolve the grievance before it gets to a civil lawsuit. 90% of those grievances never even get exhausted. They automatically go to the civil lawsuits because we don't have the staff that actually can follow up, monitor, work with the Attorney General's office to resolve grievances. That step has to happen. It's going to be a huge cost savings down the road to just have someone following up and completing the grievance process and tracking them, tracking trends, making sure we don't do the same mistakes over and over again, that the courts will pick up. The courts will be more expensive. These staff will actually be keeping track and monitoring and making sure we resolve the grievances so they don't get to a lawsuit.
Certainly understand that. I want to ask a little bit about, you have 2 other positions, a program officer and casework specialist. Are they involved in the grievance process? I mean, what part of their caseload can help with that as well?
So James, on it for the record, it kind of is, but it's, they still do help with the grievance process, but they're more for casework planning. So they do more for our offender planning to determine the program needs and the release entry needs for those offenders so that we keep them on the right track to make sure they get the services they need. That's really what they come down to.
So they don't spend any of their time on grievances, or
They do.
what percentage would you say?
Ooh, I would say
Ish.
close to 50% of their time is working on grievances right now.
About half their time. Okay. Thank you so much. Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Chair. Sorry, I almost called you Senator. Thank you. We're going to move over to the Director's Office, if we could, to Budget 101-3710. I was really happy to see one of these transfers that it appears is happening with the decision to not utilize the budget from the markups. So thank you for taking that under consideration. That makes a big difference to many people. So with this plan to reduce the product markups, will there be any other sort of funding changes that will be happening if the positions to the general funds are actually approved?
James Arenda for the record. So what our priority to do with those changes and with this, with the cost won't be utilized for the positions is actually for the other services for the offenders. When you talk about phone calls, right now the FCC reduced any possibility for the state to receive any revenue. All the revenue from the past and the phone calls went into the inmate welfare fund, which paid for all these positions. That doesn't happen anymore. So what I plan on doing is when we move these positions over, any of the revenue that comes from the commissary accounts will actually help with increasing the amount of free phone calls we can actually get to offenders. Right now, the only free phone calls that we had offered were 15 minutes that one day, every day for an offender that's in the female facility. I want to offer that statewide because the impact that made on the families that they have not communicated with in many, many years and going back to families that they weren't communicating with was a big deal. I truly believe that increasing free phone calls to the population will actually increase the support that they need in the community and their families to get them back together again, which is important to keep them out of here.
Follow up, if I may, just to make sure I've got this correct too. With some of our background information, it sounds like the markups on clothing, food, and vending has been eliminated in some areas for the personal hygiene, not necessarily some of the other areas. But are there any other sort of changes that are necessary to take place with your internal documents or with the possibly the I guess the administrative regulations that are necessary and being considered?
James Arenda for the record. So we already went through 233B process on the commissary pieces, so it just caps it off at a certain percentage, which we agreed with on the 35%. What we're going to see is there is going to be some revenues coming in on the tablets when we actually get them all into effect, which is also the revenue that I plan on using for putting back into the system to increase those phone calls, reduce even commissary even further, so it takes more of the burden off of the families.
Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome, Assemblymember. Assemblymember Mosca?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair, and I'll continue with the Director's Office, your office. I can definitely see the need for the case management system and the impact. Can you talk about if that is approved this session, when you think it could be implemented?
James Rutherford, if I could, the one that's going to be overseeing it, I'd like to hear the Deputy Director, Tess Weed, to come up.
Welcome and thank you. State your name for the record. We start.
Emily Testweed, Testwuide, Deputy Director of Programs. Can you restate the question?
Oh,
And
yes,
pull
I
that
can
mic
repeat.
down. Pull that mic down a little bit. Thank you.
I could repeat the question. Just if the case management system is approved this session, when can it be implemented? When do you foresee?
So if it was approved, I don't know when the contract would begin, October? I don't know. Yes.
This is not that good.
Well, I'm just,
Just saying.
Kitty DeSocio for the record. I just want to, I don't want to cut ourselves short because we are going to have to go through the RFP process, which you know is never quick, I think, unless they're on a MSA or a NASBO, and I really don't know. So that, I would have to get back to you on that, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That would be great. And a follow-up, please, Chair?
Please, let me just say this. If you would, share it with the committee secretary, okay? You know the routine. Please go ahead, Assembly Member.
Thank you, Chair. And then the $500,000 cost for this, is it a one-time or would it be a continued cost? Or if there are, I know you don't have the vendor yet, but what do you anticipate with that?
So it's Emily Tesser for the record, it's a flat rate fee of $500K. No added costs for any changes, so they would assist with updating our systems. If there's any changes in legislation, forms, processes, and work in conjunction with our upgrades to Syscon and Notice.
You're very welcome. Chair Watts, you have another question?
I do. First, I'll just follow up on the questions from my colleague. So it sounds like that's an ongoing expense to have this case management tool. And I believe that is the budget that was brought forward, included funding for that, but we then got a budget amendment that removes the appropriation and looks at doing that as a one-shot. I don't think that's appropriate. So we'll continue that conversation and we'll figure out the way to appropriately fund that when we close the budget. So just want to put that out there. I have a question. The SCAP funding got brought up. I know that that's kind of been an ongoing budget issue. And yeah, so I guess my first question is, what are the agency's plans regarding the authorization to receive the newly awarded SCAP grant? I think it's $2.1 million in fiscal year 25.
So James Renner, for the record, that's still in the governor's finance office under those discussions, so I can't answer it because I don't have an answer for that.
I appreciate the candor. So we're going to have to figure that out. We're going to have to work that out together. And then I appreciate you actually provided some clarity in your response to Senator Titus's question. You said timing kind of varies around, and the amount varies around $2.7 million per year. Can you just tell us kind of where some of that variability comes from? Because it sounds like we don't always get it at the same time. We don't always know how much, or the amount changes, but help us kind of understand that variability and how we can try and plan and budget for that, knowing that it sounds like the money comes in, right? We know that we're going to get those funds. We just don't know, it seems like always, exactly when and exactly how much.
James Renner, for the record, I don't think anyone in the state will be able to answer that. That's a federal issue. And we did get the check in for 2024. It's just not in the bank. So we know what we're getting for 2024. When we actually get the money to be able to use it and transfer it in, don't know. But we did get a 2.76, I think, for 2024.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think this is one of those issues when we're looking at this budget, and this is something I've also been interested in more as we're looking at trying to encourage agencies to go and seek grant funds. It seems like this is one that comes in regularly. And so we want to encourage agencies to go out and bring in new dollars and not be punished by supplanting out general fund. With this account, I think one of the ways that I look at it is kind of as a loan, right? We're putting some money in to make sure that we can fund things until we get that money in the bank, so to speak, until that grant comes in, and then that's what we use. And so I guess partly a question, more a statement. I think that we need to figure out other ways that we could address that, whether it would be utilizing the contingency account or being able to have some ability to move money between other budget accounts or items in order to address that. Because I know what's now happened is we've tried to create that flexibility overall for government, and the department is now seeking some of those exemptions from IFC to retain general fund dollars in this area. And again, I think in general we want to support that, but when it comes to this, it's really that bridge funding because of the timing and variability issues. So I guess I just ask that you work with some of our staff to figure out what are some better ways that we can streamline the management of that.
Thank you, Chair Watts. In other words, think of it as a loan that needs to be repaid. And how do we figure that out? That's the way it works in my head. So I'm pretty simple. All right, Assemblymember Dickman?
Thanks, Chair. For a second question. This is in the Warm Springs correctional budget. And I think you talked a little bit about why this stuff happens, but is it correct that you've filled a correctional lieutenant position in Warm Springs Correctional Center budget account without budgetary authority to fill the position? And if that did happen, could you explain a little about why?
James Render for the record. I can't answer that. I don't think we did, but that's something that we could put on our notes to be able to follow back on.
Okay, because in this background stuff, it does say that the eliminated positions were not removed from the human resource data warehouse, and but the eliminated correctional lieutenant position was filled by the agency, though the budgetary authority did not exist. So if you could get that information for us, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
You're very welcome. I'm going to switch up a little bit to the emergency response teams. You talked a little bit about this, Director Zorinda, as to what happens now. Just can you go into a little bit more detail as to what are those efforts like now at Southern Desert when there is a situation?
So James Renner for the record. So there is no emergency response team that's separate from a housing unit or a regular post that's at the facility now. So when you look at High Desert, these staff, they're constantly being moved to escort high-risk profiles from one area to another. They respond to the incidents, to quell the incidents, bring it under control, assist with shaking down the units, because you don't have staff just available to do that. At Southern Desert, they don't have anybody to do that now. So when you have an incident, they shut areas down and pull the staff out of those areas and act as an emergency response team. So what happens in those other areas, they're not being covered. So what we do when we're not covering them, we lock everything down and leave it alone. And that shouldn't happen. It just hurts our programming long term. It actually can cause disruptions in a unit.
Certainly understandable. Thank you. Just a follow-up on that. So you're asking for 34 positions so you can put a team like that together. My question is, talk to us a little bit about your ability to fill those positions. I know your vacancy rate is down to a very impressive 12%, so congratulations. Talk a little bit about your ability to fill those, because that's a lot of positions. And if people are going to transfer from some other areas, how are you going to backfill those?
James Arenda for the record. So there's a couple parts to this, but yes, we don't hire into those positions off the street, per se. We put the more senior staff that want to work in those positions that are already trained in it or want to be trained in it to work in them. Then we replace those positions that we pull them out of with the new staff coming on board. And like I said, in the last week of December of 2024, we had 0 correction officer openings at Southern Desert. We didn't have any. We actually had over 5,000 applications pending for the entire part of the bottom part of the state, the southern part. We have no problem filling them, so it'll be no big deal.
Well, certainly, congratulations on that. That's great to hear. Senator Titus?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the staffing stuff is making me a little crazy here. One question, what does the emergency response team do when there's not an emergency?
James read it for the record, so we use for preventative. So when first of all, they're always being used. When it's not an actual emergency, they're doing shakedowns of housing units, shakedowns of yards, they're doing perimeter security, not only just searches, but checking fence lines. They're doing anything that can help prevent a problem in the future. So they are not just sitting around waiting for the bell to ring.
Good. Okay, good. So they can be a resource. You know, you're using them as an additional resource, and then if there is an emergency, you're not having to lock down and short some other facility. So I just wanted to kind of get that on record, that these folks are just not sitting there watching a monitor waiting for something bad to happen, and then they go do something.
And James read it for the record. And when you have the higher level security and the more dangerous people that moved over to high desert, if there ever is a mass disturbance over there, these are more additional staff that we could respond, shut the facility down at Southern Desert, and have trained emergency response people to respond over at High Desert as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think we also want the prison population to stay safe, but we want our officers to stay safe too, and so having that backup. So thank you for that. So back to actually the budget. So and looking at the offices, can you let us know maybe the agency's plan for existing incumbents that would be impacted by the recommended position transfers, specifically from the Wells Conservation Camp to Northern Nevada Correctional Center, Lovelock Correctional Center, and then the director's office, and then I'll have a follow-up if I might, Madam Chair.
Sure, James on it for the record. So there won't be any impact on those that are currently working. These are duties that they're going to be filling. But again, I don't have a definite yet from approval from the governor's finance office on what that's going to look like. That's why we'll see a budget amendment on that, but they're not replacing people. So it's not like we're moving them to, and we're going to let somebody else out or a position go.
Okay, along that same line then, the rationale, can you explain the rationale for transferring all offender-driven costs from Wells Conservation Camp to High Desert State Prison without also transferring the associated correctional staff, which are recommended to be transferred to the other institutions and the director's office?
So I can't give you a great answer on that. This is James Erner for the record. But the inmate-drivens were moving down there because of the deficit in the inmate-drivens that we're at currently at High Desert. I don't know if those the inmates were actually moved down there that are the outside clearance, so it did increase the population of the outside clearance at High Desert. So, but those inmate-drivens for those offenders would be moved down there for the increase in the outside clearance people.
All right, along the same lines, please discuss why offender-driven costs are recommended to transfer from Wells Conservation Camp to High Desert State Prison, since the agency has previously indicated the movement of offenders relating to the Wells Conservation Camp closure would be between conservation camps.
James Arenda for the record, I'll have to give that as a follow-up because I don't have that answer in front of me.
All right, you'll get that to our staff
Yes.
for sure. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, you're very welcome. I think you have a phone a friend who's looking to answer one of those questions. Am I reading that? Because I'd like the senator to get an answer if she may.
I would love that too, thank you.
Phone a friend. You can always phone a friend. Please state your name for the record, and thank you for being willing to jump in.
Good morning, Senator Committee. Thank you for the question. Jason Giesler for the record, Administrative Services Officer, Department of Corrections. The transfer of offender inmate-driven costs from Wells to High Desert is because currently both Wells Conservation Camp and Carlin Conservation Camp inmate-drivens are budgeted approximately about the same. In FY25, those offender-driven costs, inmate-driven costs, are about $175,000 per Category 50 for each camp. Okay. So to transfer the $175,000 from Wells into Carlin would double that up. Both facilities house approximately 150 offenders, so there's no need for additional inmate-driven costs there. So the department moved those inmate-driven costs to its larger facility, High Desert State Prison.
Okay. All right, thank you for the phone a friend answer there, sir, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. That was a much better answer, Director. That was a much better answer. All right, we're getting close to the end of questions, but I do have Assemblymember Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Back to staffing, right? So I'd like to talk a little bit about Humboldt Conservation Camp and Tonopah Conservation Camp. It seems like we have some ghost positions. I'm wondering if you could just clarify. It looks like 11 positions are recommended for transfer out of Humboldt in the 25-27 biennium were eliminated in the 82nd session of the legislature. And then additionally, 6 positions recommended for transfer out of Tonopah were eliminated, but not out of the state's HR system, right? So it looks like we're staffing up. So how were they reestablished in the governor's budget, right? Do we know how that happened? Are you aware that that's happening?
Senator Taylor, committee, can I go straight to Assembly Brown May? Thank you. Jason Gizzard for the record, Administrative Services Officer, Department of Corrections. So the department is aware of some position eliminations that happened in the 29-21 timeframe that were supposed to be eliminated through the budget, but were not actually fully removed out of the HR system. As such, the department ended up with these PCNs that sort of carried forward. As positions filled, as you know, we have 2,800 or so positions. So as positions filled naturally through attrition over the years since then, people have been inadvertently placed into those PCNs that should have been eliminated. We have identified those positions right now, and we are currently working with our internal HR staff to process ESMTs to remove them from those positions into other vacant positions so that we can work with the Governor's Finance Office on removing those positions from the system.
Thank you. So then I just really want to clarify. I would never suggest that you would not need staffing at a certain level, right? And that as we transition positions, it's important to just know if you need the staffing. I'm curious if it would be better handled in an enhancement unit rather than just budgeting for a PCN that you might actually need, right? And so I just want to throw that out there and understand how you're budgeting for staffing so that it is clear as we're comparing apples to apples as opposed to apples and oranges. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome. Committee members, no one else has given me the sign that they have. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Director and staff. We appreciate your coming here, Director Zorinda. And there are several things that we're looking to get to our committee secretary so staff may have them and answer those questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too. And thank you for bringing your team because we needed to phone a friend a couple times, so. Okay, now we are down to the last item on our agenda, and that is public comment. If you would like to make public comment via phone, I'll give that number. That number is 888-475-4499, and then the meeting ID number is 822-4125-4835. So that's the number if you'd like to make public comment by phone. And we'll see if there's anyone here in Carson City who would like to make public comment. Seeing none in Las Vegas? Anyone there in Las Vegas who would like to make public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will go to the phone lines. BPS, will you please let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers.
Thank you so much. All right, we are dismissed. We close this hearing on the Department of Corrections, and thank everybody for being here. Have a great day.